Society and Twin Cities Public Television over the previous 12 years. Mr. Dietrich plays a significant role in preserving the stories and history of our service members. For that reason, I've asked him to be our keynote speaker for today's event. It is my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of the Minnesota Military and Veterans Museum, Mr. Randall Dietrich.
Good afternoon. A turnout this size in a setting as lovely as this certainly affirms the lives of those we gather today to remember. Lives that you individually hold dear, lives that we collectively understand pay for the freedoms we enjoy today. I'd like to extend my respect and appreciation to every family present. I've spent my life interviewing veterans, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Cold War. Taken together, their service would not have been possible without the sacrifices made by their loved ones, all of you. Museums help to provide a connection to the past. Many of you likely know that Memorial Day was initially called Decoration Day in the years following the Civil War. Many of you likely know that Minnesota was the first state to offer troops in defense of the Union. Joseph Berger was one who answered the call. Born in Austria in 1848, Joseph's family immigrated to the United States when he was just a child. Their new home in Chicago was marked with tragedy when the outbreak of cholera claimed the lives of his parents in 1854. Orphaned at the age of 6, he was sent to a foster home in New Ulm and began to work on a farm. He reportedly grew tired of such work when news on April 12th of 1861 of the attack on Fort Sumter finally reached young Joseph. He imagined life as a drummer in a drummer. Thank you. A drummer in the Minnesota Regiment. That summer, he set off to join the Union Army. Owing to his strong spirit and tall stature, the recruiter, short on scruples, allowed him to join the 2nd Minnesota Regiment as a 13-year-old. In October 1861, the 2nd Minnesota marched off to war and spent the following year in Kentucky and Tennessee. Joseph Berger and a dozen others were guarding a wagon train on February 15, 1863, and came under surprise attack by the Confederates, 125 in all. Isolated, the squad held off the onslaught until reinforcements from the 2nd Minnesota arrived. For his actions on that day, the 14-year-old Joseph Berger from New Ulm, Minnesota, would receive the Medal of Honor. The 2nd Minnesota participated in some of the most storied battles of the Civil War. Berger recorded in his diary that he took pride in being a drummer. He took pride in being a drummer because of the important role they played providing instructions to the troops and the soldiers. They cannot operate without a good drummer. Joseph Berger was that drummer. He re-enlisted in 1863 before being badly wounded in a mishap while guarding Confederate prisoners on July 9, 1864. His right leg was severely injured. His left arm was amputated. He was sent to Chicago, where his parents had died a decade earlier, for further care and recuperation. In July 1865, 17-year-old Captain Berger was discharged from the Union Army. Undaunted by the wounds that he would endure for the rest of his life, he went on to practice law. Served in the Minnesota State Legislature, married Caroline Knowlton, and together they had 7 children. Joseph Berger died in 1921 at the age of 72 and is buried at Oakland Cemetery in St. Paul. Flash forward 100 years. On March 28th, 2023, Lenore Berger donated her ancestors' Medal of Honor to the Minnesota Military and Veterans Museum. To help make that connection to the past that Eric spoke about, it is on display here in the committal hall. Please check it out if you're interested. Also in the hall is a new painting entitled Women on Guard by Charles Kapsner. For the next couple of years, Joseph's medal and Charles' painting will be on display at our museum just across the river within the walls of Camp Ripley. Then, thanks to many across central Minnesota, including Representative Krisha, who was a lead author, and Senator Howe, who is also a lead author, and other members of the state and Senate, we will very soon open a new, larger facility between this site and Highway 371, just beyond those trees. We will literally connect the past of this cemetery with that museum across the street, including the 10,000 stories that reside in this cemetery, to honor them. National challenges like the Civil War, resolved by military institutions, have shaped much of our collective state and national experience. The documents, artifacts, images, and stories of how Minnesotans in uniform and at home will increasingly willingly serve their state and nation in times of war and peace help to honor their memory. The museum inspires future generations through the exceptional stories of Minnesota's citizen soldiers. For example, 24,000 Minnesotans fought over 4 years to free 4.2 million enslaved people. Joseph Berger's December 1863 re-enlistment came well after the Emancipation Proclamation, when the nation clearly understood what was at stake in the Civil War. The disabilities he suffered in 1864 did not keep him from inspiring others. His grandson, Warren, took note of his father's legal work and went on to become Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. General John Vesey, laid to rest here in the cemetery, is another example of the extraordinary stories to be shared. His 4 decades of service as a soldier and statesman during the Cold War cannot be overstated. What makes for exceptional stories is not notoriety, but rather the kind of unheralded, unassuming heroes we all knew. They encircle us here. Veterans who were tenacious and understood teamwork. Veterans who were true troubleshooters and problem solvers. Veterans who continued to serve well after their time in the armed forces. Veterans remembered for their unbreakable bonds with those they served alongside, for their devotion to the country, for their love of their family. I'll close with a simple call to action for all of you. I ask you to give voice to those exceptional stories that you hold in your head and in your heart. Share them with your family, your friends, your neighbors. Share them with young people, the next generation of our Minnesota National Guard. Share them with the museum. In doing so, you breathe life into their legacy. With your help, the stories of those veterans who have passed can inform our present and inspire our future. Thank you very much.